This is a two-part video, so if you haven't seen the first part, you should probably go do that. And if you have seen the first part, maybe you should go rewatch it again, because the amount of time between release of the first video and the second video, it's pretty big. Links in the description. Assuming you have watched the first one, we'll cut to the chase. After we found the star map on Tatooine, it was time to go to the next planet, Kashyyyk. More dreams came to me as we arrived, and I made my way out onto the heavily forested area. Now, Kashyyyk is home to the Wookiees, but they're in a pretty bad way right now. Circuit Corp set up shop on their homeworld, intent on making every last Wookiee man, woman, and child into a slave. This is what we in the business call not good. Not too long after arriving, we ran into Komat again. Fancy that. He's here for another hunt, it seems. I made sure to check out both shops and buy what I'd need for the upcoming fights. Mostly medpacks and stimulants. Then I left for the deep reaches of the forest. Along the way, I fought some Kinrath. They aren't too bad to deal with, but these were just the normal kind of Kinrath. There are harder ones coming up soon. I also ran into some Circa guards and watched them accidentally kill one of their Wookiee slaves. Of course, I didn't like that too much, so I opened fire on them. Further along, I encountered the aforementioned harder Kinrath, the Viper Kinrath. They can poison you and do a considerable amount of damage to boot. I dealt with them using the wonderful method of running the hell away. Midway through my jaunt, I stumbled across a group of Sith assassins. Not wanting to pull any punches like I did on Tatooine, I set down a considerable amount of mines to deal with them. It didn't work. What did work was me running away again, firing my blasters at them whenever I could. Afterwards, I was stopped by some Wookiees and was brought to their leader, Chundar. Long story short, it turns out he is the one helping Circa Corp capture Wookiee slaves. He also confiscated Zalbar for the time being, which meant literally nothing to me, but was nonetheless rude. I could get Zalbar back if I helped Chundar get rid of a Madclaw, a Wookiee gone insane, which was pestering his Zerka allies in the Shadowlands. I agreed, if only to get me closer to my goal, and left Chundar's house. I walked back through the village of Ruruk to return to the forest, deciding to head directly to the Shadowlands to deal with the Madclaw, killing more Kinrath along the way. A group of Wookiee hunters had the same idea as me, so after some conversation, I persuaded them to tell me a bit about the Shadowlands. They pointed me in the direction of a nearby lift. A quick walk later, and I was on board, heading down into the deep dark. There were some Kataran down here, who were considerably harder to deal with than the Kinrath, but stimulants go a long way. Further along, I met a new party member, Jolie Bindo. He had me follow him to his house, and I started to worry that he'd do terrible things to me when I least expected it. Thankfully, he didn't. He just wanted me to deal with some Circa thugs who were poaching on his land. There were a lot more Kataran down here, and they are not easy with just a blaster pistol. I eventually stumbled across the poachers, and instead of doing the right thing, I decided to help them commit their crimes. Hey, they gave me money. What they didn't say was that it was an insubstantial amount of money. So after killing a few tacks and getting nearly nothing in return, I opted for the good route, which involved me just convincing these guards to hand over the password that would turn off their sonic emission fields. After I turned off enough, a large beast came to attack them, but not me because story logic. Instead of going straight back to Jolie, I decided to return to the surface and head back to Ruruk. See, while I was down in the Shadowlands, I found a pertinent side quest item, returned it to the quest giver, and was rewarded with items I wouldn't use, because of course I was. Now back to the Shadowlands, I returned to Jolie, and now he was going to accompany me to the force field that only he knew how to turn off, for some reason, probably more story logic. Of course, I kept the challenge sacred. I just left him where he was standing, and he would spawn to me when we got where we needed to go. Now we were in a new area of the Shadowlands. Immediately on arrival, I ditched Jolie, and shortly later I was greeted by a Wookiee named Grarar, who was being attacked by Mandalorians. I helped him defeat them, healed him, and he gave me a quest to kill the rest of the Mandalorians in the Shadowlands. There were a ludicrous amount of Kinrath down here, but they're easier than the Katarans, thankfully. I'd say the worst part about this portion of the Shadowlands is definitely the Mandalorians. They are incredibly powerful, and most of them end up having energy shields, which I have to whittle down before I can cause them any actual damage. After many more battle encounters with various denizens of the deep forest, I came across Freyr, who was the Madclaw I came down here to kill in the first place. This was an incredibly tough fight, as he only utilized melee, and anytime I was in melee range, he absolutely destroyed me. So I had to run around the vast majority of the Shadowlands while taking pot shots at him until he declared himself beaten. From there, I told him I didn't mean him harm, as he was the one who attacked me first, which he accepted, and we discussed how he came to be down here in the first place. It turns out he used to be chieftain. Apparently he was duped by his son Chundar, and the only way we could make him chieftain again was by grabbing the lost blade of Baka, a legendary Wookiee of yore. Freyr had the hilt, but the blade was stuck in a large monster that I had to kill. And let me tell you something now, this fight could have gone a lot worse than it ended up being. The ritual beast, as they called it, was pretty slow and would oftentimes just stop moving for no reason. Then he got stuck on some hanging vines, which really came in clutch. All in all, not the worst fight ever, and I finally had the blade. Now it was time to tackle the real reason we were in the Shadowlands, acquiring another piece of the star map. This is a pretty easy puzzle. You just answer the questions how Revan would answer the questions, and voila, it's yours. Now technically, we could just leave Kashyyyk right now and move on to bigger and better things, but I wanted that sweet experience. So I returned to Freyr and got ready to head back to the surface. Of course, that couldn't be easy, as Chundar sent his goon, singular, Gorwookin, along with some other nameless Wookiees to kill me. The retreat and shoot method worked wonders as it usually does, and I was on the lift back up before I knew it. I didn't even make it to Rorukruer before I was stopped by a Wookiee that insisted on accompanying me the rest of the way. Now it was a wonderful family reunion featuring Zalbar, Chundar, and Freyr. Of course, since I'm the main character, I'm the deciding factor on whether I'm siding with Chundar or Freyr. And since I think slavery is bad, I'm siding with Freyr. This is one of the very few times that I could not control what the other person in my party was doing, but Jolie didn't have a weapon and was only doing 1 damage with each hit, so I'm gonna let it slide. This part was a lot easier than I thought it would be. There's plenty of room to run around, and once all of the guards are dead, everyone gangs up on Chundar. It's absolutely hilarious. With Chundar finally slain, Zalbar was gifted Baka's blade and would eventually become the new chieftain. Not going to lie, it's a really good sword, but I absolutely sold it later on for that sweet, sweet money, and because nobody cares about Zalbar anyway. Now it was high time to return to the ship and find a new planet. On our way out, we were treated to the empowering and downright hilarious sight of newly freed Wookiees absolutely demolishing the remaining Zerka Corp goons. Back on the ship, I set course for Yavin, hoping they would have some new items for sale. We were also treated to another cutscene of Malak telling his apprentice Darth Bandon to hunt us down and kill us, but to bring Bastila back alive. There was nothing new at Yavin, though I did sell everything I didn't need, as the shopkeeper here pays you way more for your items than anywhere else. Time to go to Korriban, home of the Sith Academy, and another piece of the star map. Oh no, Bastila can't join me on Korriban because she might be figured out as the Jedi that they're looking for. Whatever will I do? Anyway, I took my leave and started my journey towards the academy, which I plan to join. There was a shop here with a new blaster pistol, a very good blaster pistol. In fact, Kashyyyk heavy blaster pistol. I bought it and then pissed off some Sith, which is always fun. I also stopped at the other shop and bought some really powerful stimulants because I'm not joining something called the Academy without some study aids. The beginning of Korriban is just chock full of random tidbits to do. The first of which was me getting stopped by Lurz Kesh. Apparently, he used to work with Davik a little bit, and since I have Davik's ship now, he wanted to work with me. He was looking to get the spice delivered that I apparently had stashed on my ship. News to me. So I rushed off to do that big old side quest, which consisted of me briefly leaving Korriban for greener pastures. While I was gone, I took some time to upgrade Kashyyyk pistol, which became basically the best weapon I'd have the rest of the game. Now we could for real join the Sith Academy. I tried to make my way in, but the guards informed me that I'd have to find one of the Sith Masters, and she was apparently holed up in the bar I just left. Either way, I went to go talk with this mystery person named Yuthra Ban, but of course being the powerful Sith Master that she was, sensed my unlimited power, and took me to the Academy straight away. This is a pretty simple plotline for the most part. Now that I'm in the Academy, I'm a Sith hopeful, and what else does Yuthra Ban want me to do? She wants me to help her kill her master so she can be the dominant one of the Academy. Who saw that coming? From a Sith, oh my goodness. I agreed, of course, to further the plotline, and made my way to Uthar Wynn. To gain Uthar's favor, I would need to bring him many Sith artifacts from the crypts scattered across Korriban. Before that, I recited the Sith code to him, which took me a couple of attempts because I forgot it. You know, because I'm not a dirty Sith. I also took some time to interrogate a Mandalorian prisoner about the whereabouts of his weapon cache. I eventually accomplished this by giving him copious amounts of drugs, which was fun. Now completely zonked out of his guard, he told me where the cache was, but the Sith interrogator who was originally trying to get him to talk decided he wanted to be the one to tell Uthar about the cache instead of me. Of course, I was not going to let that happen. Except, I kind of did, as he brutally murdered me to death. Good thing I saved before that. I returned to Uthar, told him about the weapons, then decided it was time to go raid those crypts I mentioned earlier. Of course, since I'm on a new planet, that means I have to get ambushed at least once by somebody, and that somebody was Darth Bandon. I remember back when I first tried this with my buddy Hunter months ago. It was horrible. Just absolutely god-awful. Thankfully this time around, it was a lot easier. I may have overprepared a wee bit too much. Also, I'd like to apologize now for the screen effect when I have Jedi Knight Speed on. I can't turn it off. At least on the Xbox version I can't. Once Bandon was dead, I moved onward, fought a couple of Shiraks, and went into their caves in an attempt to hunt them to extinction. They were easily dealt with, and there was some pretty decent loot in the cave to boot, along with a couple of Sith hopefuls who were running away from the Academy. They wanted me to help them find a way out of the cave, and that involved me fighting a Tarantetic. Tarantetic are incredibly powerful creatures from ye old Sith times, and this fight very much proved that. I would have died had I not ran back into the room where the Sith hopefuls were. The Tarantetic got stuck on them somehow, and that gave me the perfect opportunity to kill it without much hassle. There was still a bit more of the cave to explore, and I'm lucky I did, as I found the Quelled Roma robes, which I'm pretty sure are the best robes in the game, offering far more defense than standard robes, and some extra wisdom for good measure too. I made sure to put them on, and then I left. Once out of the cave, I had my choice of 3 crypts, and I picked the Tomb of Ajunta Pall to search first. Of course, I was going to go in all of them, but this was the closest one. There were Tukata here, and they gave me plenty of experience, but the real kicker was the line of assault droids that I had to figure out a way to sneak by. Normally, this is a pretty easy task. You just equip a shield and run past the bridge, avoiding taking as much damage as you can. But this time around, I decided to kill all of the droids for the experience, figuring I'd get a lot since they were tough. But that was not the case, as they only gave me 40 experience each. Whoop-de-doo. Most of these tombs are pretty short, and before I knew it, I was already at the sarcophagus collecting my loot. Of course, each tomb has a puzzle to solve, and this one required me to pick the right sword and put it into the hands of a statue. If I picked the wrong one, I would have to fight Ajunta Pall. Thankfully, I've done this quest a lot before, so I knew which sword was right. Not that it really mattered, I never used the sword I get anyway, and killing him would have allowed me to complete the tomb and obtain Uthar's praise. On the way out, I was attacked by Shardan, a Sith hopeful who wanted to steal the sword and show it to Uthar himself. He didn't last very long. Next up was the tomb of Marco Ragnos. There were a lot of war droids inside, but nothing I couldn't handle. At the end, there was a rogue assassin droid. Not much harder than the other droids I've killed so far, but I noted that the droids in this final room were a lot tougher than most. Inside of the sarcophagus, I found Marco Ragnos gauntlets, which I couldn't use, not that they did anything productive anyway. Final stop, the tomb of Tulak Hord. This place was filled with Tukata and Shirans, so it was overall pretty simple. Towards the end, I was suddenly knocked unconscious by poisonous gas, which was apparently placed there by the old headmaster of the Sith Academy. When I came to, I and another Sith student found ourselves before the old headmaster. He peppered us with questions, and we had to answer them correctly, lest one of us take a nice blast of force lightning to the face. Now, I could have just answered all of the questions correctly myself, and the other guy would have ended up dying, but remember, I'm trying to play light side, so I didn't want to do that. I divvied up the correct answers, and occasionally picked the wrong ones, and after a while the other student was able to free himself, and me, and together we attacked the old headmaster. Unsurprisingly, he immediately ripped the other student to shreds, but that just gave me more time to shoot him before he started attacking me. With that done, it was time to return to Uthar with my bounty of archaeological discoveries. Pleased with my success, and seeing as how I'd gone above and beyond in my quest, I was chosen to be the next Sith inducted into the Academy. But for that, I had to go to the tomb of Naga Sadow, because of course I did. Pretty much this whole tomb consists of a puzzle that's actually rather simple once you figure out how it works. Of course, that doesn't stop it from taking a long time, and the raids didn't help either. Deeper in, I was faced with what I would consider the most challenging part of the game so far. 2 Tarantetics. When I saw them, I very much thought, well, this has been fun. But force speed really helps when you're kiting enemies. I'm assuming if I'd have been using melee weapons, this would have taken me an astronomically long time. Having managed to survive that, finding the next piece of the star map would be easy peasy. I also grabbed the Sith lightsaber I needed so I can complete my initiation into the Academy. Of course, the only reason I grabbed it was to sell it. I'm not actually going to be a part of the Academy, as clearly seen here when I murdered the headmaster and the headmaster's assistant, conveniently leaving me with some very expensive items I could sell later. Trying to make it back through the Academy was like pulling teeth. There were a lot of Sith inside, and at one point, I'm assuming they just got tired of my crap, because they literally force-pushed me back through the exit. Not gonna lie, I didn't even know that could happen. I gave it a couple of shots, and eventually decided it wasn't really worth it to kill them at all. They don't give me any experience, well, at least any experience that would matter at least. Of course, I wanted to go to Yavin next so I could buy some kick-ass gear, but the game had other plans. You see, after you beat 3 planets, you and your ship get pulled into the Leviathan via a tractor beam. The Leviathan is the vessel that Malak is on, along with Saul Kareth, Karth's old mentor. TLDR, the crew gets captured, and before we get taken away, we came up with a plan. Someone among us would have to do the heavy lifting and free the rest, as Karth, Bastila, and I would be under much tighter security since 2 of us are Jedi, and Karth used to work with Saul. So, if you recall from part 1, I mentioned there was a mission where you were forced to play as a different character. This is that mission. There's no way around it, at least not without using some serious glitches, I would imagine. I actually got a lot of comments on the first video in the vein of, no, you can't beat this challenge, what about the Leviathan, huh? This challenge isn't about beating it without ever having anyone follow you, or so on and so forth. It's about beating it by doing as much of the game as you can with only the main character. Not every challenge has to be perfect, you know. Either way, the person I decided to help free us was the one, the only, HK-47. Gotta be my favorite companion in both Knights of the Old Republic games. So let's just skip all the story parts because honestly, we don't really need those, now do we? Now, originally, I wasn't going to use any of his level ups, but I figured, hey, if I have to use him, I might as well. This part is extraordinarily easy. It's one of the only parts where you have to play as a singular character without extra party. So yeah, it's gonna feel a lot easier than anything else I've done up to this point. The whole section is basically just me murdering Sith patrols. Simple and easy. I eventually found my main character and was forcibly joined by both Carth and Bastila. Thankfully, the always wonderful solo mode exists, so after I re-equipped all of my gear, I let them stand around thinking they were being helpful. This next part, yeah, it was pretty hard. Virtually all of the Sith patrolmen on board throw grenades now, and most end up doing a lot more damage than I'd like them to. Some Dark Jedi Masters on board joined the fray, and their liberal use of Force powers packed quite the punch. Yeah, won't lie, I died a fair bit during this part, but that's what saving often is for. After much murder, looting, and a bit of spacewalking to boot, I arrived at the bridge. I knew what to expect from this fight. Oh, I knew all too well. I have to take down Admiral Kareth and his patrol of elite Sith troopers and Dark Jedi Masters by myself. Carth and Bastila were here, but let's be honest, I haven't leveled them up at all. If they get hit once, they die. So it's just like they're not even here. Honestly, I didn't have a good plan to get through this part. There's so much happening all at once, and I'm not kidding you. There were grenades thrown pretty much every chance a grenade could be thrown. There are no decent tactics for this fight. Run wherever you can, shoot whoever you can, and heal whenever you can. It took me damn near 30 minutes of attempting, and I'm not gonna lie, in the end I just got really lucky. I made a save mid-fight, which is something I try not to do, but it felt like a necessity at this point. Once everyone else was dead, Kareth was a cakewalk. Then we retreated to a cutscene where Kareth, with dying breath, whispers something to Carth, but we don't get to know what he said yet. We have to make it back to the ship. After what I'd just been through, running back through the corridors to get to the Ebon Hawk was stupidly, joyfully easy. Of course, there's still one more thing to do on the Leviathan, and that's the fight with Darth Malak. Now, this game is like 20 years old, so if you don't know this, you're a little late to the party, but nevertheless, here's a spoiler warning, so skip ahead if you need to. It turns out the main character is in fact Darth Revan. After our moment of self-discovery, I went on to beat the absolute tar out of Darth Malak by myself, since he conveniently froze my compatriots in place. After my stylish beatdown, Bastila comes in and saves the day by buying us time so Carth and I could escape. Now we're back on the ship, and everyone knows that I'm Revan, but the only person who's pissy about it is Carth. Literally, he is the only one. But I don't care. We've only got one planet left now, and that's Manaan. First things first though, it was back to Yavin for some shopping. Little did I know, apparently he still doesn't have anything new in stock. Jesus H. Christ, I just want to become a god, is that really too much to ask? Looks like we're doing Manaan first. I think this is the first time in my existence that I left it as the final planet to do. Usually I try to do it as the second one because it's kinda boring, but you know. I landed on Manaan, talked to one of the Republic soldiers posted outside of the hangar, and I can't remember why, but I decided to go back to Yavin again. I'm assuming it's because I wanted to play Pazak with Suvan Tan because he plays for large quantities of credits, and if I beat him 10 times, I got a discount on all of his items. Of course, he didn't make it easy on me. He's literally the best Pazak player in the game, and I also think he's probably a low-down, no-good, dirty, rotten cheater. Pretty much any time he can get the number 20, he gets the number 20. I don't know how he does it. Even when he doesn't have any cards in his hand, he somehow still gets the number 20. I saved every time I beat him, so I wouldn't have to beat him any extra times, but it still took me a whole entire hour of playing Pazak to get 10 wins. Now whenever I return to Yavin, he'd have that stellar discount. Back to Manaan. At this point, I kinda wanted to get done with the game as I had way too many recordings, so I didn't really do any of the side quests on this planet. Pretty much immediately upon re-entry, I was greeted by a member of the Exchange, or something. And they were like, hey, you own the Ebon Hawk, go back to Korriban, there's a guy there who will sell you some really neat stuff. So guess what I did? I immediately hopped back in my spaceship and left Manaan again. It was pretty worth it as I got one of the best belts in the game. But okay, now we're back in Manaan for real, and I'm not leaving until I'm done with it. So as I said, I didn't really do any side quests. The only notable one was swoop racing, and the only reason I did that was because swoop racing is fun as hell. Once I was the official swoop champion, I moseyed on over to the local Republic base, and they tasked me with infiltrating a nearby Sith camp. Pretty much nothing at this point in the game stood very much of a chance of killing me, so the retrieval of the broken Republic droid's memory core was a piece of cake. That did not stop me from tearing through the rest of the Sith stronghold and killing as many as I could, which just so happened to be all of them. Admittedly, once they started bringing out the Dark Jedi Masters, things got a bit more challenging. Towards the tail end of the base, there was a door puzzle I had to solve that took me way longer than it should have, but that's okay. I also helped the Selkath Sith apprentices see the light by brutally murdering their master in front of them. I left, and wouldn't you know, this is one of the few times in video games where you actually get arrested for your wanton acts of violence. Ain't got no main character plot armor now, do we? Actually, that's a lie, because I'm only in prison for about a solid 2 minutes before they let me go. Back to the Republic HQ. They sent me on another mission. Go down into their hidden base deep under the water and hopefully fix whatever was happening down there. Vague, but okay. It did help that the star map was here, which was infinitely more important to me than solving the Republic's problems. The problem at the station just so happened to be that all the Selkath have gone insane and are murdering the Republic's crew. And the Firaxa sharks made going from lab to lab very difficult. There's really not much to say about this part. It's fairly easy. The Selkath hardly ever get the chance to attack me, and when they do minimal damage. It also helped that prior to our encounter, I gassed the vast majority of them from the computer station. After wandering around the place killing all the insane Selkath and combat droids, I eventually found an environmental suit which would allow me to wander the depths of the ocean. This has got to be the slowest part of the game by a landslide. For some reason, when you're in the suit underwater, you move at the speed of molasses going uphill in January. There is literally nothing I can do to make myself move faster. This part always takes 5 times longer than it should, and there's pretty much nothing happening down here in the first place. I did meet up with somebody from the Republic who was going to help me, and then they were promptly eaten by a Firaxa shark. The same would have happened to me, except I had a sonic emitter which immediately kills Firaxa sharks when you enter their proximity. I should also note that this is one of the buggiest areas in the game I've played through so far. Whether it be me using the sonic emitter on a Firaxa shark and then getting stuck looking like a karate master, or I think my favorite one so far, somehow shooting lasers at the bottom of the ocean without my blaster pistols equipped at all, which you're not even supposed to be able to equip or use at this part of the game. But that's pretty much all this section is. Just slow walking and using the sonic emitter on the sharks. Very exciting. I do eventually come to the other section of the lab where I'm accosted by 2 of the few remaining Republic members. There were a couple more Selkath inside for me to take care of, but no sooner did I enter the lab when I had to exit again. Thankfully, I didn't have to stay outside for very long. I had to solve a quick puzzle in order to actually get to the star map. I went with destroying the Kotor fuel tanks in order to continue, which was the light side way of doing things. And with that, we have the last piece of the star map. Look at that. Now I just have to walk through all of the areas again, which took just about as long as you'd imagine it would. Once I was back topside, the Republic wasn't very pleased to hear that I destroyed their secret Kolto harvesting machine, but that is solidly not my problem. The Selkath weren't too pleased with me either, considering the explosion I caused at the bottom of the ocean, and I found myself in court once again. Like before, it was easy to get out. I just told them about the giant Firaxa shark at the bottom of the ocean, which apparently is some sort of god to them, and they let me off the hook. Now I could just make a beeline to the Starforge. But why would I do that when I could instead go back to Yavin for like the 14th millionth time? Of course, I knew what to expect when I arrived back on Yavin, so I was somewhat prepared. The Trandoshians that I told off a couple of trips back returned very angry at me, and I had to fight like 8 of them. This was pretty difficult, but I'm stocked up with an obscene amount of medpacks and energy shields, so I just had to hold out until I dropped every single last one of them. Now I had full access to Suvantan's inventory. It's worth noting that I sold everything I didn't need, and now had way more credits than I could ever spend in a lifetime. The main thing I was looking to buy was the medical interface visor, which increased my treat injury skill by a whopping 10 points. I also bought this lovely stealth unit, which wasn't as good as the belt I was wearing, but it gave me an extra point of dexterity. The real kicker here was the advanced alacrity implant, which gave me 5 extra dexterity. Ludicrous. Sadly, there weren't any new weapons that I was able to use, but I did have a dexterity of 31, which is unbelievably, stupidly overpowered. Now it's time to go to the Starforge system, the final stop in our journey. A few obligatory cutscenes later, and this video is getting a little long, so I'm gonna do some spot coverage until we get to the part I know everyone's dying to see. I'll also note my character kinda looks like Geordi LaForge from Star Trek The Next Generation, doesn't he? Our ship crash landed on the planet, and when I stepped foot on the surface, I was immediately attacked by Rakatan warriors. I put them in their place without trouble. As of right now, the only thing in this area that poses a real threat to me are the Rancors. So long as I kited them like my life depended on it, they went down relatively easy. After enough wandering around, brutally murdering Rancors, I was stopped by some Rakatan warriors, who brought me to see the One. Apparently I had been here before when I was Revan, though I didn't have any recollection of it now. Apparently I had promised to help him, but allegedly went back on my word. This is when the game gets kinda confusing, but we're not worried about the story right now. We're just gonna brute force our way in. Now I have to kill the One and all of his followers, including a bunch of Rancors. Good thing they made this arena large and circular. Perfect for kiting. It's also worth noting that when I finally cleared this area, there were tons of storage bins just filled with good loot. definitely worth the visit. I still had to battle my way through the rest of the One's compound in order to leave, but the Rakatan warriors weren't putting up much of a fight. Back outside, more Rakatans and Rancors together. I wouldn't have even mentioned this skirmish, except I hit max level during it, so now my character is even more of a beefcake. The next task was for me to find the Elders so they could help me open the temple's doorway, which, once inside, would hopefully have something I could use to destroy the Starforge. It didn't take long to find them, and while at first they didn't want to help me, they eventually relented, so long as I was the only person going into the temple. That's not a problem. I mean, that's what this challenge is all about, isn't it? So the Elders and I gathered outside of the temple, and guess what happened? Two of my party members that I barely ever talked to decided to storm in and demand entrance to the temple as well, because apparently it's not safe for just me in there. The Elders did not take kindly to that, nor did I, but they still opened the temple for some reason. It housed many Sith acolytes and patrol droids, but I was a veritable god now. Really, there's not many more ways for me to word, I just walked in and killed everything inside, because that's what I did. You know what, let's just skip to the good part. Oh look, there's Bastila at the top of the temple, but she's fallen to the dark side. Oh no! I did my best Jedi impression and tried to convince her to rejoin the light side, but that didn't work out so good. It wasn't much of a fight either. I got her down to half health and then she ran away. Now I could get our ship back in the air and actually fly onto the Starforge. Thankfully we had some help, as before we originally landed on the planet, Karth sent the coordinates to the Republic. Now we're at the Starforge, and yeah, it's pretty difficult. I mean, it is the final part of the game. Now, I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think enemies constantly spawn in. It seemed that way at least, because after I'd kill a couple, more would show up to take their place. I really did try to kill as many of them as I could, but it was becoming a hassle, and I'm already max level, so eventually I just turned on force speed and started running past all of the battles. In hindsight, this was actually a pretty terrible idea because I still had to stop and do things, but now there were turrets and hordes of enemies following me. And who could forget the Dark Jedi? So many Dark Jedi. Eventually, it was time to fight Bastila again, and who would have guessed this was pretty gosh darn easy. I mean, I get 4 attacks per turn as long as I'm using Night Speed and Rapid Shot, so I pretty much knocked it out of the ballpark. Also, I have no idea how this happened at all, and it's probably because I've never played the game without having any interest in the story components of it at all, but apparently, you can still somehow fall in love with Bastila even after you've only said all of about 10 sentences to her. This is the most baffling thing ever, and when I saw the dialogue for it pop up, I actually laughed out loud. It's just one of those moments that you probably never realized could happen unless you played without caring about the story at all, which honestly I do not recommend you do. Okay, final boss fight time. We're skipping a little bit ahead. I was very worried about this. In general, it's a tough boss fight, and blaster pistols don't make it easier. So how this fight works is you'll get Malak down to about a quarter of his health pool, and then he will run up to one of the many unconscious Jedi trapped in tanks and drain their life force, fully healing himself. He does this, I don't know, about 12 times. It was a long, arduous battle, and even with all of my god tier equipment, he can still do about half of my health and damage with one use of Force Lightning. Of course, I used the one strategy Malak would never expect: kiting. Yep, it's still an effective strategy. Maybe a little less so here because he can do this wicked force jump lightsaber move. In the end though, Malak couldn't withstand the awesome amount of running the hell away I was doing, and promptly died in shame. The final cutscene played, and there you have it. For the most part, yes, you can beat Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic using just the main character. This was definitely a fun challenge, and one that I can highly recommend if you're feeling a little burnt out on playing KOTOR normally. I mean, the sheer amount of comments I got in the first part of this video where people told me this is exclusively how they play the game is probably something. If you have any challenge ideas for either of the Knights of the Old Republic games, throw them in the comments. I'd be really excited to do some more of this. If you enjoyed today's video, give it a like, and think about subscribing because that stuff helps me out a lot. Also, check out some more of my challenge videos. If you like this one, I'm sure you'll like those too. Check out the Discord and the Patreon, links below. A special thanks to my patrons Dr. Maritimus, Riley Anderson, and Anonymous. Y'all are the best. Thanks to 6 somewhat less ignorant now rats in a trench coat for helping me write this script. They actually managed to spell Rancor on the first try. Bless their hearts. And until next time, stay safe out there, and peace out.